Hello, hello, folks. Hope you're doing good. I am just trying to get my audio controller to go away. There it is. Way. Thanks for joining us today. It is the fortnightly supporters game stream, so I'll be playing some stuff you might have seen on stream before. Iterum is the one I've seen the most. I've played this through twice so far. I'm looking forward to playing it again, but I do have some sort of like queries about how it feels to kind of play it more than once, because I like this game. I find it interesting. I like the setting, but I also feel like it doesn't kind of pull me into wanting to play it again. So I will be playing and kind of thinking about how why that is and what we can do about it. But for me, yeah, like a big appeal of playing run-based roguelike games is like, how different is it going to feel run to run? And I'm not sure if this is quite there yet in terms of how different it feels. So that's kind of what I'm interested in seeing. So I'm going to leave this one till last, because I think I probably will end up playing it longer than the others. And then we've only got 3 other games today. We've got Starlode Salvage, which is a kind of mining game that it has just had a visual glow up by the looks of things. It was kind of very generic before. They've gone for this more sort of 70s type style for the visuals of the game, which is really nice. Trials of Liberation I haven't played before. Little top-down puzzle game. Let's see how much that melts my brain. I will download it now. Starlode we can play in the browser, and then R.A.T.S. I'm going to play this first. This was like a little a sort of like breakout block breaker game, but with some extra stuff layered onto it, you know, like you kind of thought of something like Peglin. Peglin is, you know, the sort of pachinko model of a game like Peggle, with a little bit of kind of fantasy and stuff layered in to add more stuff to it, both to change the appeal and to give it a bit of depth. And R.A.T.S is kind of like that with Breakout, and I like this idea. So I'll be playing through those 4 today. I'll just have a look at the notes that the devs have left. And I'm sorry if I'm a little bit low energy today. I am so tired. I've had a couple of nights where I haven't slept so well. Yesterday I had to do lots of driving. I went down to the college it was about an hour's drive away to try and sort out our work experience. Those of you who are in the Discord might have seen me posting about that. We're getting a bunch of local students that are on sort of like games, you know, music, VFX, video courses to sort of sign up to do their work experience through Indie Game Clinic. So folks that are members and in the Discord and sort of support the channel and part of the Discord will get the sort of short-term access to students to do little kind of mini internships for them. It might be making Steam capsule art for them. It might be editing a trailer. It might be just playtesting the game a load and writing reports. So I'm going to be talking about that pretty much every time I stream for the next couple of weeks, because I know there's lots of you who are in the Discord but don't see me post about that, and I want as many of you as possible signed up so you can get help with your games and provide that work experience for those students at the same time, because it's really hard at that level of education to get work experience in games, because larger studios don't want you in there because they've got IP privacy and stuff like that. They don't you know, you just end up kind of, if you do get a foot in the door, you just end up making tea. So this is a really good opportunity for both our devs in our community and those guys, because they get to do something that's actually relevant to what they're learning, which will be really cool. So, you know, it might be that you can get a composer to make a bunch of pieces of music for your game. It might be VFX work. It might be 2D art, you know, doing hero images for your Steam capsule and stuff like that. If you're interested in that, have a look at the thread. I think it's under community development in our private Discord. There's a thread there where you can kind of see the discussion of it so far, see the way that initiative has developed. And yeah, I really hope that people get the most out of it that they can, and that it goes well. Because if it goes well, it can be something that we offer every year as well. But yeah, Vagabond said, move back to Europe. Oh yeah, time zones changing. Yeah, I mean, I stream at a weird time anyway because I mostly stream when like kids are at school and stuff like that, rather than the evenings. So that kind of puts me out of sync with a lot of streamers. I feel like I'd not be qualified to tell a student what to do though. Yeah, so that's kind of where I come in. I'm sort of setting up these rough briefs that say this is what QA testing is, or this is what a Steam image needs to do. So people can kind of sign up to work on a game, do that brief, and then the devs who take part do need to give them some feedback, but the briefs will kind of already be set. So there's a little bit of communication where the devs need to give some feedback through their teacher, you know, just for safeguarding reasons. But yeah, that should be cool. I'm also very tired because yesterday I was trying to work on my game. I was trying to do channel management things, and there was just a lot of community management to do. We had a lot of, I think the stuff that happened in the Discord was very good. We had some long, fruitful discussions about, you know, NSFW games and like what we can do with that on the Discord, and like the Discord censorship stuff and all of that kind of stuff. And that was very kind of productive and positive. But yeah, so the response to mine and Tom's review of the latest book on the Game Developers Library podcast, specifically in the YouTube comments, was very, very exaggerated response. People really don't like you spending 5 minutes out of 95 discussing why a book about game design shouldn't refer to gamers as he for the whole book. And I think it just kind of goes to show how much, you know, everyone thinks everyone else is in an echo chamber. So I'd say this with that caveat, right? Everyone thinks everyone else is in an echo chamber because they kind of see people that don't agree with them and they think, oh, you must be brainwashed. You must be in this echo chamber that I'm not in. I'm not in an echo chamber. You're in an echo chamber. So I say this with that caveat, but I feel like so many, it's a bit trite to say that lots of online game dev spaces are male dominated, because they kind of statistically are. But if you don't raise these things, if you don't say, hey, maybe it's alienating for this book to refer to game developers as if they're always a he, if you don't raise that and treat it as a problem, then you're not like openly making women and other people who aren't men feel comfortable in the space. And I see so many sort of like one of the reasons why I don't do interview podcasts, is I wouldn't want to do it unless I did it properly. And in my mind, that would be diverse. It would have a lot of voices in it. I see so many like game dev podcasts on YouTube where it's just two dudes that I can barely tell apart if I take my glasses off talking about money. And you'll see someone that is like, you know, they've interviewed 100 people and they've never interviewed a woman. And that's the kind of thing when I mean that it's like, it's not an open hostility, but it is very much treating it as a lads club. And that's kind of, it's kind of understandable. It's kind of predictable, but at the same time, the kind of over, it's sort of exaggerated, disproportionate pushback I get for being, you know, I don't even think this is kind of woke or DEI. I think it's just, if you're doing a review of something that's subjective and you're giving your own reading of it, it's like, here's what I responded to. And personally, it was a bit cringe to hear someone, even in a book written in 2013, write that way. And that's not just like, someone in the comments said, oh, this is an informational video, you should leave your politics out of it. And first off, it's not an informational video, it's me giving a review. And quite frankly, it's very rude to basically say, shut up about your own opinions and just tell me what the book says. If you want to know what the book says, just read the damn book. And I know I'm just sort of like, this is rhetorical. I know the 27 people in the chat aren't that person. But the other thing is, whenever anyone says, oh, leave politics out of this, a good thing to do is replace the word politics with values. Because politics is this negatively loaded term, right? It's kind of like propaganda. Propaganda was actually a neutral term for like political campaigning. But over time, we've come to sort of think of words like propaganda and ideology as like negative words that we only use to talk about someone else's stuff. And politics is a bit like that as well. Leave politics out of this. But no one would ever tell you to leave your values out of it, would they? They wouldn't say, don't bring your values into this. And that's what I was doing. And the thing is, over my career, I've worked in two different educational settings. So I've worked in a high school and I've worked in a university. And during that time, I've visited other high schools and I've visited other universities, and I've been like an external examiner for other universities. And I've worked in 3 game studios in terms of full-time jobs where I've been a salaried member of staff. And that's also involved like lots of work with other clients. Like my first job, our main client was Adult Swim Games. So I'm in Canterbury in the UK. I'm on phone calls with someone in Atlanta at Adult Swim Games. They've got like a team of 5 there. And then, that team that I worked with, we also worked with Mediatonic. That was like our parent company. So I've worked in 3 game studios, but I've also worked with all these other companies that were like co-developing studios and publishers and IP holders and all of that kind of stuff. And what I've seen in every one of those settings is that the stuff that kind of angry gamer people online sort of classify as being this kind of woke DEI agenda is basically just the kind of standard of normal decency that has existed in the majority of middle-class jobs and workplaces in English-speaking countries for the last 20 years. And it is so strange to me. I understand sometimes when someone's coming from a different cultural background and it's strange for them to, see more trans people or be expected to not assume that someone is religious or whatever, and to like basically to operate in a more secular society, which is the UK is very secular. But it's very strange to me because these things to me are not really political. They're just, everything's political on some level, but it's not like I see the world as a particular way and I'm trying to change it and make it more like this. It's just the way that I'm saying things are, which is like, for example, when you're writing a game design document and you talk about the player, you don't gender them, right? That has been the standard of documentation in every single place I've worked, every educational setting, every studio, even in a studio where it was really laddish and there was like only one woman there, we still wouldn't talk about the player in a gendered way and call them he. And even when I've been working on games that were like games that were predominantly for girls, like a Roblox experience fan club for like a girly pop band where 99% of the visitors would have been girls, we still didn't talk about the player as she in the documentation. And I'm kind of getting very specific about this, but it was very, very tiring dealing with that yesterday because I think there's this bubble of people that spend a lot of time only having their conversations around games and games culture with similarly minded people online. And it's kind of like what you get when you see men online talk about any hobby, because you see it with like guitar dudes as well, where they post all these sexist memes about how like their wife hates it when they buy new guitar pedals. And it's kind of like this thing with hetero people where they sort of couple up with someone that they don't like, and then they think that everyone of their gender is like that. They get this idea, they get the kind of John Blow idea that there are no women out there that are into making games or even into playing games because in their life they've never encountered them. And that's because in their mind that's how the world is, rather than how their social experience is, often as someone who is quite socially awkward and doesn't get out there and talk to people and meet the sort of people that they could do that would kind of change their mind about those sorts of things. So I find this kind of stuff very, very frustrating. I think the next time I put a book review on YouTube, I'm going to turn the comments off, and that is partly just... That's not just to kind of protect myself from having to look at them, but it's because the next book we're covering is very much about like queer creators and marginalized people making games. And I don't want everyone who watches this channel who is from one of those backgrounds or is supportive of people in those backgrounds to have to wade through that and see it all there. So next time, if you see that I've turned the comments off on the next podcast that we put out on the Anthropy book, that will be why. I'll be doing it preemptively. I'm not going to like wait for things to go bad and then turn it off. And it's just frustrating because there are enough game dev channels that I should be able to be over here like with my own values, let's call them, and people that want to hear someone interview 10 identical looking men or 100 identical looking men in a row about how much money they made can go and watch their own thing. And, you know, I set that podcast up because I thought, why are there so many people making games that haven't read a book about it? And also, it would be good for me to read more books about it. So I'll make a podcast where I read books. And the response to that kind of stuff is just like, it's just interesting, you know? And it's a lot to think about. And it makes me think things like, why is no one kind of getting to the conclusion that, like, okay, this sort of person has these values, and this is the sort of person that actually has worked in an educational setting and reads these books and teaches people about this stuff and has actually worked in studios and like mixed studios with other people and isn't just like a kind of savant working in their bedroom. And sort of that, to me, that it feels like there's a big overlap between the kind of you can and must make games all on your own and be totally independent and not collaborate with anyone, that kind of mentality, and this very sort of antisocial idea about like society and not wanting to be more inclusive. And it just makes me sad, makes me tired, makes me lose a little bit of sleep. But that's my opening ramble for today. I've gone on for a long time, but that's why I might be a bit downbeat today. I just find it very, very tiring. And these people just kind of think that they're the core audience for your channel as well, when they're not. You know, they'll sort of announce, well, I'm leaving then. And it's like, well, I basically just told you to go. You know, I was very open that these are the values that this set of media things have embedded in them because of who makes them. If you don't like that, go away. And then they go, fine, I'm going then. It's like, yeah, good, that's what I want you to do. So it's just a very kind of tiring set of interactions. And it's not like that in the Discord, but it is like that out here. So I'm gonna, with certain things, I'm gonna be a little bit more stringent with who gets to leave a comment on things, I think. Anyway, let's get on with the games. I will be timestamping this so people can skip that on the VOD, but let's check out what's happened with R.A.T.S. And I just want to see if there are any notes, because sometimes devs leave a note on what they want me to check out. I've taken the feedback from last stream and made plenty of adjustments, and now there are some new content ideas I wanted to know if they're worth pursuing. Reach level 2 with the mini boss. Okay, I like that we've only got a few I like that we've only got a few of these. Because it means I can play each one a little bit longer. This was the one that started the Rats of Nim thing. I'm not talking about doing a disclaimer. I'm literally just talking about specifically that podcast. When I post it, I'll just shut the YouTube comments. And the reason for that is so that other people that are going to come in and see sexism, homophobia, transphobia don't have to see that. Because people, you know, we already have a channel on the Discord for people that want us to talk about the book, and mostly we don't talk that much about the book because other people are too busy making their games to buy all these books. That's why we do the podcast. So I don't think we're really losing much by preventing people from discussing that episode. But it's a problem with this channel with this platform specifically. No one's gonna like review bomb the podcast on Spotify. This is a demographic thing, but the people that listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of the podcast platforms are people that are used to listening to podcasts, and they're people that are used to listening to grown-ups having adult intellectual conversations that they might disagree with on some level, right? That's like kind of core podcast audience. What YouTube viewers see as a podcast is often just two people sitting on camera having a web call, and that means that the audience that comes for a book review podcast on YouTube is not really prepared sometimes for some people having a intellectual conversation about a book, or understanding that it's actually perfectly valid to take 5 minutes out of 95 to talk about something that might really put people off the book when you're doing a sort of slightly academic review of that book that is intended for a wider audience than just kind of bros that want kind of marketing hacks for their game or whatever. Okay, let's go back to being a little rat. That's all I care about now. I'm a little rat. I've got a thing here that says use cheese. I can activate that with Q or W, and I press space to start the breakout game. I like the shape of this level. I think, I mean, I thought this the first time I played it, but like the theming is a really good use of breakout, because breakout's totally abstract, but this kind of means you can have a different thing up here, right? You can try different multiple levels with that kind of funnel, or with like different shapes up here, which is quite neat. But I don't think I can get through that stone one at all, metal one. Okay, now we get a crewmate, which is like a power-up, I guess. The ship will move faster if we get retain. If we get dub-dub, we get double balls. Existing balls go brrr with Mouster. Okay. So there's some stuff where if this was made into a bigger game, obviously, like down here it says 3 cheese. It's like, is that a cost? I guess it's a cost. There's lots of places where it would be nice to have an icon instead of text. And that's stuff you probably know already, but it's just stuff to think about for later on. I'm gonna go, I want the double balls guy, but I don't. There we go, that's the cost button, I think. So it says 27, that's how many clay balls I have. I would, I don't know. I think there's some layout stuff here that makes it a little bit confusing. We're taking him, we're putting him in the captain, and we don't have enough clay balls to buy anyone else, so we'll... okay, so I didn't realize that, but the little bits that fall down are a currency, and they're the clay balls. That's really cool, because it creates this like moment-to-moment thing of like, you're not just trying to break the bricks, you're also trying to break the bricks and catch the things, and having to go and catch those things is going to like push you in the direction of moving away from the ball. So you've got a nice triangulation, like a risk-reward thing of, do you just play it safe or do you go for more of the clay balls? I'm not sure clay balls is the most exciting name for them. I would think about like even just calling them rubble or something makes them feel a bit more like a currency. And I think the reason why clay balls doesn't work for me as a name is because we're playing a game about hitting a ball, right? So calling the currencies clay balls kind of runs the risk of confusing it with the metal ball that the player is using. So I would call them rubble, pebbles, stones, whatever, fragments. Get some cheese out there. Oh, I lost my cheese. It feels very punitive losing a piece of cheese because it takes so long to... Oh. So it takes so long to unblock it and get it out of there. Right, so the way that these metal sliders work is they don't move until you've blocked everything beneath them, I think. Rubble, Barney Rubble. So I think this is our lives. Someone in the chat said, can we lose the ball? That's Arthur. Can we lose the ball as many times as we want? I think we just have quite a lot of lives. Ah, that was the tutorial level. I see. Yeah, the friction between like just trying to play the basic game of Breakout and trying to go and collect stuff while the ball's in the air is really nice. That's like a really nice kind of... it's frustrating though. Okay, I need to start using the ability that I've got. So I think this is like it was a ball doubler or something. It uses 3 cheese. So let's shoot that up there, do that. That's very satisfying. And this is the make or break thing for pinball machines for me as well. Like I love pinball machines, like in real life pinball machines. And if I can't work out how to get the multi-ball on them, it's like that's the thing I'm aiming for, right? It's the power upgrade that you feel, even though it makes the game harder to have like multiple balls to have to think about. Just that moment in a pinball game when you get multiple balls is just so good. And if it's very hidden in the way that pinball machine is designed or whatever, I find that too frustrating because it's not getting me to the thing that I really enjoy in pinball. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Who's this guy? Yeah, I think the boat's angle does affect the bounce. There are so many things that make it like slightly different from core Breakout. Which is great because it means that you see the game and you immediately know how to play it because it's Breakout. But then there's a lot of nuance and stuff that's not in Breakout, and that means that you have a much higher skill ceiling for it. It feels like the sort of game that I could very much get lost in for quite a long period of time. Like the I don't know if anyone saw that Book and Horn game I was playing last week, but that got very kind of just into a very tasty kind of flow state very easily because it was the core thing you were doing was so simple, but the situational variance in it made it feel you know, not boring to keep doing for a long time. Really, really nice. Give me that cheese. I'm trying to find a good position to launch my power up my special ability again. Last ball lost. So one thing I would say that feels a bit off there is it feels a bit strange to still have a ball in the air and then you lose all your lives, you don't have any more balls to launch, and the game registers it as you're dead, which doesn't really kind of match up with what we would expect from any of these games, like keep the ball in the air games. So I would always make sure that even if you're out of lives, you still have to actually lose the last ball that's active on the play area for you to actually die, because that felt a bit wrong. Okay. Oh, I fudged it really bad there. I've got so many clay balls now. Okay, let's get the faster ship. Get a Meowster for later on. I think also having characters as your little power-ups is just a really, really nice way to add a lot of sort of character and like very loose world building to the game without actually having to have characters that are like dudes walking around in your game or something. I think having a vehicle as your main thing you operate is just a generally very good thing for indie game scope. It's kind of one of the things I really admire about Dredge. Because, you know, Dredge has little towns and you can go and talk to people and stuff, but they're just illustrated characters and, like, low-poly house models. And yeah, there's no bit where you, like, get out of the boat and walk around or anything like that, and it's just a really good thing for scope. And then you can have just characters as little illustrations for either, you know, whether it's things you interact with in a story or little kind of power-ups that you get, like these guys. I need to remember to trigger these special moves, though. So... Can we also put the key that activates each one on them? Because it says Q or W to activate. I'm guessing one of them is Q and one of them is W, so it would be nice to have the key, like a little key shape with Q, a little key shape with W here. Secret cheese, secret cheese, secret cheese. Okay, up there. Pew! That's what we want. And then when we get another cheese, we can trigger it again. Ooh. Got a shiny blue thing. Gonna do that. Existing walls go brrr. That's what they do. Okay. Right. Let's do Mr. Pusscat. Yeah, Pacific Drive is another good example of a game where it's, I mean, it's a big polished game. I think that's like a team of quite a few people that worked on that, but it's still a lot bigger and more polished than it would have been if they tried to like put a bunch of character models and stuff in it, you know? Like, you don't even have hands in Pacific Drive, you just have the tools you use. Oh yeah, oh yeah. The tail is great. That's a good little... I mean, you can't really play around it. You just have to sort of react to it, but that's fine, I think, given the type of game it is. Run out of balls. I ran out of balls and it didn't end the game. It's good. I'm trying to think about what this needs. I really like the set of things that you have here. There's, you know, apart from a few things to do with like the UX and the UI and just juicing some of the stuff up, I think the base of this game is really compelling. I think one thing to think about is sort of kind of ritual and celebration, right? Of like what happens when you finish a level. what happens when you die, all of that kind of stuff. It might be worth thinking about that now, because when someone sits down and plays a session of a game, even if it's just a playtester playing for 10 minutes, they're going to have quite a different experience depending on how much of a big deal you make out of them winning and dying and stuff like that. And I think the dying is the one that we often neglect. We just go, okay, restart. And that's fine in a Super Meat Boy or some speedrunning game. But I think in a game where you're very much focused on like trying not to die, having that moment of death feel really kind of deflationary. There are a few just simple things you can do, like darkening some graphics. I cut the music out when the player dies, that sort of stuff. Just some sort of sting. Start to make those bits of the game feel bigger. I like this boss concept. It's really neat. I didn't actually manage to get the... I wanted to see what would happen if the ball went in here and went round with the boss. It kind of makes me wish I could just restart this level without having to play the others again, because I want to see more interactions with the ball with this swingy tail, because it's very funny. Yeah, and I think there's kind of it depends how long you want to be working on this project, of like how many times you iterate through the art. But there's lots of little tweaks I would make to the art here, and some of it is just maybe making, because everything is quite washed out, and that makes the sense of depth feel a little bit weak. So one of the visual design things I would do here is make the background darker. I think you have to make a choice, right? You either have like a dark, high contrast foreground, and then you use this sort of faded, foggy background, and you use that kind of more sort of low contrastness to indicate the difference between the background and the foreground. Or you do the opposite, and you have all the front stuff as this kind of trippy pastel stuff, and then you use a kind of more closer to black, darker background. But I think you need something to make everything pop out a little bit. I don't have much trouble reading what's happening in the game currently, but I think that's something that could be improved a little bit on, just by sort of working out what the player's supposed to be seeing on the playing field, and then kind of increasing and decreasing how visible different things are. Just gonna have a quick look at Peglin again, because I've got Peglin on the brain today. So they have quite a lot of varied backgrounds in Peglin, right? So this is kind of, I think this is quite a good sort of expectation setter for if you wanted to take R.A.T.S and turn it into a bigger game. I think Peglin is a really good sort of competitor analysis case of like how much content would people expect to see in a game of this type? How much variety of like stuff is there to do in terms of like playing through the levels, and then how much variety of stuff is there to do in terms of like collecting characters and having different combinations of those two power-ups. Because as I said about Iterum at the start, like with run-based games, for me, the value in them is like, how early into the game can I pivot my build into something that feels different from the last time I played the game? You know, maybe last time I had a really balanced party, and this time I choose to go all archers and see what happens. Well, whatever it is, the early into the game you can get that pivot. I think the more compelling sort of replayable run-based game type thing is, and I'm not sure if that's what the intention is with R.A.T.S, but I can't help but compare it to Peglin, and I think Peglin is a good place to go to for both the kind of structure of the game and like what the content variety is, and also like the visual design of it in terms of contrast, and how they keep some visual contrast while also changing all the decoration in the background is quite interesting here. So yeah. Would Peggle be a good example too? Yeah, I mean, Peggle is what Peglin is based on. The difference is that Peggle is like a hyper-casual game that a modern indie game player probably wouldn't buy, whereas Peglin is kind of made for people that like that core gameplay but want something with a little bit more kind of crunch in it, I would say. Yeah. Yeah, Peglin is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I mean, that's the thing. You kind of need to find the best thing in the market that is close to what you want to make, and then not just like that's kind of like your baseline of what good is, but then you probably still need to sort of address some problems with that design. So if you read all the Peglin reviews and people were like, it was too repetitive, then okay, how do we make this thing less repetitive? And I think the nice thing about R.A.T.S is you do have a little bit more of like what feels like a physical real place in the level. So you can do stuff like have a level where this zigzags up and you have to bounce up. You could even do stuff like having a level where when you go up higher, you've got some little pinball flickers that maybe they're like Sonic the Hedgehog springs, and your rats don't directly control them. There's just things that if they bounce off, they'll go up at 45 degrees, that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of things you can do with this concept in terms of variety and what's in the level, and also because you're actually making it seem like a physical place. And that's a little bit different from Peglin, because in Peglin, it's like the physical, the fiction part of the world is the battle happening up here, and the thing that's happening down below is much more like an abstraction of something. So they are different, or they are fundamentally different, but maybe you've got more tools to sort of deal with the problem of the repetitiveness of a Peglin type game, because you've got a kind of a sewer with those arches in and stuff like that. I don't know. It's an interesting design space to be in. Let's check out Trials of Liberation. I haven't played this one before. The other 3 games today I've all played before, but this is a new one. And it looks like it's a Game Maker game. I see a Scribble license. That's a Game Maker library. Does your keyboard have the arrow keys? It's giving me an A symbol. And that to me indicates that this is a kind of controller first game. I mean, another thing, Java, to think about with R.A.T.S is what do you do with the rest of the screen? Because at the moment it's portrait oriented, which makes sense, but if you wanted to turn that into like a Steam game that someone would give you $5 or $10 for or whatever, they might be okay with some of the screen not being used, but maybe it's a missed opportunity, right? Maybe there's something you can put to the side of the game. You have the game over one side and put something in the other side. Like maybe it's a top-down view of the boat and all of your treasure and inventory is in it, and it's like a passive thing, like something you get on the top level of a DS screen. Obviously loads of work. Obviously don't just do that for the sake of it, but it's something to think about. Like maybe the fact that the game is like this little narrow portrait window could be a problem of like how much value people think they're getting out of the game, and that doesn't mean you need to decide on what you do with the other half of the screen or the other 2/3 of the screen, but it does mean that later on you might have ideas that just naturally solve that problem. And that's like something we talk about a lot on this channel, and that I talk about when we're doing mentoring sessions with people and stuff. Record every problem your game has, and record every idea that you have for your game, and don't always judge them in the moment. Like, don't jump to solutions for problems as soon as you see the problem. And when you see it, when you have an idea, don't immediately decide it's a good or bad idea and start doing it or dismiss it. Just record it all, and then as you move through your game and you iterate on it, sometimes you'll, like, an idea that's in your backlog will become naturally better or worse. And we covered this in the Tyne and Sylvester game book that I talked about with Tom at the weekend, that we did a podcast about. He has the same idea. It's like you have a backlog, you have like a big ideas reservoir, and you know, you finish a sprint or however you're working on your game, however disciplined you are about doing like Agile Scrum or whatever, you finish a sprint and then you evaluate the game and you playtest it, you playtest it yourself, you give it to other people, and then you find out what's wrong with the game, or you find out what's good about the game and what you want to emphasize, and you go back to the reservoir and you go, right, which of the ideas that we previously had solve the problems that we have now? So it's kind of like having your own mini stock market of ideas, and by doing that you sort of accept that the value of the ideas is going to go up and down over time, rather than just like having an idea and immediately trying to work out whether it's good or bad. So for me with R.A.T.S, I feel like the fact that it's not taking up the whole screen and there's all of this wasted screen, that to me is a problem. I don't know what the solution is, and I don't know how big of a problem it is, but you might have an idea later on for some sort of system or mechanical content where it just naturally emerges that, oh, this is how I could use the rest of the screen. And then suddenly you've got like the Miyamoto quote that a good idea is one that solves 2 problems, right? An even better idea is one that solves 3 problems or 4 problems. That's the way that I like to think about kind of problems and solutions in design. Does your keyboard have the arrow keys? Yes, it does, but I'm using my gamepad. This is the demo for Trials of Liberation. Here you will be able to play several levels full of puzzles and challenges available in our different game modes. Enjoy the experience and remember that this is only a demo. If you find any bug or unexpected behavior, feel free to report it on our Discord. Your feedback helps us to improve the game. Let's play. Don't like this guy. Okay. I'm just minding my own business. I'm hanging out in a dungeon. There's a torch. It's a big CD sitting out there. I'm hanging out in my dungeon. I've got no arms. And then there's this creep. He's giving off big, like, Katamari, King of Cosmos vibes up there. Don't like him. We always need to do the disclaimer in the Stanley voice. Stanley read the disclaimer because he was a sensible consumer. Here we go. Press X to interact. Use L to move and leave this prison. Mood. Press Y after 5 seconds to restart the level. Okay, so we're doing like a... Oh, okay, so basically Y is a restart like you would have in most sort of Sokoban-y type puzzle games. I don't have to use it. I was wondering, like, is this going to be some weird game where I need to, like, restart at exactly the right time? No, it's just telling us that we can't immediately restart. We have to wait 5 seconds. I'm not sure why that is. Okay, I got up the ladder. Oh no, I go through the door. It's not... maybe it's a bookcase rather than a ladder. I'm not sure. I love all the art assets I'm seeing here. There is one visual design thing that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but I think people will probably guess what it is before I get there. But I like what I see. All of the individual parts look nice. I love a kind of single screen level, generally. It's just a thing I like. I'm not sure. I guess these are dodging puzzles. You could call them puzzles. I'm not sure this really is scratching a puzzle itch for me yet, but it's sort of billed as a puzzle game. They're like Zelda rooms that you have to speedrun, I guess. Yeah, so I think that the visual design thing that is slightly... It's not too much of a problem, but I think it makes the game a little bit hard to read. It's just the distinction between the floor and the walls, because they're both using the palest shade of grey. So what I would do is I would reserve this brightest shade of grey for the top of the walls and not use it in the floor at all. And then I would make the floor only the darker shades of grey. The other thing you could do is have a colour that's only in the floor, but I would reserve this brighter thing for to show you where the tops of the walls is, because particularly like here, when those are up, that looks like one continuous wall, for example. What are these? What are these orange things? It doesn't feel very oomphy to get hit. I kind of... Do I have a health bar anywhere? It doesn't sort of tell me how many times I can get hit, which makes me just want to... Okay, next. So you've got a time score, you've got a time rating, and how much health did you finish with? Yeah, we can't see the health as we're playing. I guess the idea is you're trying not to take any hits at all, which is fine, but I can see the health now. Maybe that was a bug. Green button down there. I'm struggling with some of the timing stuff, and it's because I just can't seem to lock into it. And it's also, there's a little bit of like, it doesn't feel painful when you get hit. Maybe it's like a lack of sound. So feedback when the character gets hit doesn't feel like... I think this is one of those things where the type of like feedback where, you know, you hurt an enemy and there's some VFX and there's screen shake or whatever, or something hurts you and there's some VFX or screen shake. This is where that kind of stuff gets often described as polish, and where I would be wary of describing it as polish, because, I mean, you can polish different things at different stages of development, right? But the way that we often talk about polish, or the way that I see it talked about on here, is like, it's all the stuff that you do at the end to make it nice. But there are certain things that you could consider like polish on a mechanic or a feature, which are really crucial to conveying what's happening in the game. And at the moment, I feel like when the character gets hurt, you've got a little bit of information there. You get a tiny bit of knockback, and the character goes red for a second. But there's no sound, and there's not really anything to make me feel it. And I think the little bits of visceral feedback for when you're taking damage or when you're getting hurt in a game are really important, because they sort of train your brain into thinking that that's the thing that you need to avoid. And the thing with this game currently, this is kind of one of those things that, you know, when we talk about game feel, this is one of the things we're talking about. It's not just how do things move around and how do they feel. It's also like responsiveness of like getting hurt and hurting things. The power, what's happening in terms of the power in the game. Like when the player is doing an expression of force and like smashing barrels in an environment, there's the player exerting their power into the game world. When the game is hurting the player should feel it in some way. And this is why we have things like, you know, rumble pack, screen shake, all of that kind of stuff. Currently, it's like, I understand the game at an intellectual level, and I can see it, and I can see what I'm supposed to do and what I'm supposed to avoid. And there's a little bit of feedback to tell me when my character is getting hurt, and I understand when my character is getting hurt at an intellectual level, but I don't currently feel it. And I think when you've got like very character-driven games that have an action element, this is like an action puzzler, but you know, when we're piloting a character around in a situation where you're supposed to avoid them getting hurt, you really need to put that extra effort in to make sure that the player feels those hits. Yeah, maybe blood. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a blood game, but yeah, one thing I'd look at doing is like darken the floor so that the bright tops of the walls stand out, and maybe make the floor so the floor could be like a sort of pastel blue or a sort of pastel-y ochre green color, and you could change the color of the floor on different levels, but keep that kind of bright gray at the top, so it makes it very visually clear where the walls are. And then you could do certain things with like full screen VFX when you get hit, but you could make them relatively subtle, you know. So I do some stuff like that in my game. When the character gets hit, there's like a I downsample the graphics so that it's kind of like the visual equivalent of a bit crush. I have a posterize effect on my game, and it normally has like 12 stages, so it doesn't really look that posterized, but then when you're taking damage, it pushes the color variation down to 5. And there's lots of different things you can do to make getting hurt feel painful. And I think in a game where you're only controlling one character, and that character is supposed to be who you are as a player, and you're not controlling any other character, then I think you shouldn't just localize the kind of pain feedback to the character on the screen. You should make it feel like a full screen thing. And there are probably some exceptions to that, but as a general piece of advice, I would think You know, make the player feel like when the character gets hurt, it's them, by doing something to sort of disrupt the flow of them being able to control the character, screen shake, all of that kind of stuff. And the reason why I'm sort of a little bit bent up about people calling those things polish is that, yeah, they are polished, but they're also like, they make the mechanic feel right. And that can be important even when you're at a playtesting stage, because it's going to determine whether a player wants to sit and play your game for like 10 minutes or 100 minutes, you know? So I got hit twice then. I lost 2 hearts. I don't... Yeah, I think there's a bug with the top HUD where it sort of comes and goes at different times. But yeah, there's something about... like, the core game here is really nice. The way it looks is nice. I like the art style. The music goes with the art style really well. There's the basis of a very strong game here, but I think for my kind of learning as a player, I really do need that more visceral, painful feedback when the character is getting hurt, because that's what kind of teaches you to care and pay attention, you know? So I was too slow going back through the bottom thing before the trap got turned back on. You have to be really fast coming back on the bottom lane there. There we go. They're gonna get me, they're gonna get me. It's cool though. Yeah, polish your core mechanics. Like, once you know which parts of your game aren't going anywhere, make them polished. I keep accidentally clicking restart on levels that I don't mean to restart. There's something about the way that menu is laid out that makes me click restart when I don't mean to. I think it's just because it defaults to restart when I would expect it to default to next level. Yeah, there we go. Next. Camera preview's nice as well. Okay, so we're doing this kind of stuff. Give me that. Okay, I know what we've got to do here. So one of the things about this as well is like I like the art style. I think the way that I would sell this game to someone is I would say that this is mini Zelda, right? This is doing these kind of Zelda dungeons as kind of little speedrunning type challenges. And that maybe makes me think maybe the character design should be a little bit more in that direction as well. Because it's kind of is a little bit generic. And I think if we had a character that felt a little bit more like a kind of a full mascot with a personality, that would help. But the style of how they're depicted is fine. I just think kind of making them something a little bit more characterful, like a little elf or a little knight or something, so that we're kind of tapping into that Zelda thing. Yeah, I don't know how we're supposed to do this one. I'm just talking too much. Okay, that goes there. Okay, yeah, there's just 2 ways that we get the other blocks. We can't reuse the first block because there's no way of getting out of the first area. So, we take this. And then I guess the faster way of doing this level is using that to stop the fire coming back on. And then you can do this. There we go. See, that is a nicely polished mechanic. Like, the putting the blocks down has kind of nice sound. It just feels nice in terms of the timing. It feels very sort of weighty and deliberate. Let's do it one more time because I pressed the wrong thing again. Yeah, I think that the comments I made about like making sure that the player getting hurt feels weighty, it's kind of similar to what I was saying about the fail state in R.A.T.S. I think we tend to leave those things. We just kind of focus on the stuff that's meant to make the player feel good, but you just remember that like failure in games is there to teach you stuff. And if it sort of teaches you it intellectually, but it doesn't feel like it does it in this kind of emotional, visceral way, then people might bounce off it a little bit because it makes the game feel a little bit undercooked. You know, it's that kind of skill-based games, like particularly sort of massacre players that play like really skill-based games, they're there partly for the pain. Right, it's like there have been studies into gamblers that it's the same sort of thing. There's a degree of masochism where gamblers that are like long-term addicted gamblers are doing it to lose. They're not doing it for the kind of possible outcome of winning. They sort of have a weird, like almost fetish for losing all their money, and that's why they gamble. And I think that's definitely something that's worth tapping into more if you're making very difficult games that are about skill and lots of failing lots of times. It's like the Miyazaki interview about Dark Souls, where the interviewer is saying, hey, you make these games because you're a sadist and you want to do all these things to people, and he's like, no, I do this because I think that I want to die in all of these fun ways. And maybe that's why FromSoft are so good at that, because they're making games from the perspective of someone that enjoys failing at those types of games rather than just enjoys the power fantasy of being immediately great at those games, right? I think to make games that are really about difficulty and being really challenged and make good games in that kind of category, whether it's this or a Dark Souls, you have to really relish the failure and like put effort into making the failure part of the fun, I think. I can't work out what these ones do. Just can't. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing on this one. One thing I'll say is I'm glad that the puzzles ramp up quite quickly, because the first couple felt like sort of Zelda reaction challenges, and now it's got, and by level 3 or 4 it's got into like quite crunchy puzzles that I'm sort of struggling. I mean, I know I'm not thinking about it super hard because I'm talking about other stuff, but I sort of like that it's ramped up quite quickly because it sort of shows you what sort of game it is. And I think that's important, because otherwise you can sort of hook players in, and then the long tail of the game that you've given them isn't really what you promised. Maybe what... There's something that happens when both of those are pressed. It goes into like... some kind of ticking is happening. So this one and the other one need to be pressed together. They're a pair, but I just don't know. Maybe if both the green ones are pressed, you can pick this one up? No. Stand on 2. Yeah, maybe that's it. I will give this one more try. I like this. I'm not kind of being dismissive of it. I think it's a neat game. I do think it's sort of pushing on this kind of more sort of like a minimalist Zelda type thing, and I think having like a proper sort of kind of quirky mascot character that's more like a Link or a Shovel Knight or something would do this game a lot of good, because it's already going to be appealing to people that like sort of Zeldas and I guess the puzzle dungeons in certain JRPGs and stuff like that. So having, like, I think the art style that the character's done in and all of the art assets of this look really nice, but I do think having a little bit more of a kind of sort of characterful mascot character for this would do it a lot of good. And then there's the kind of visual clarity of the backgrounds and stuff. Making sure the default option in the menus is really obvious which one is selected. Yeah, I think the thing is the blue highlight doesn't really indicate whether something is being brightened because it's selected or sort of grayed out because it's darker than the white. And then, yeah, just more pain feedback, please, for this, for when we're doing bad stuff and failing. We've got a little bug where the top HUD occasionally goes away. But I like the puzzle design, and I like that it gets quite difficult quite quickly. Okay, that goes on there. And then we go and get that one back, and then that one goes on the other blue one. And because we're coming this way, we can trigger the foot switches and turn these off. Save ourselves a little bit of grief that way. Oh. I'm gonna leave that one there. I like this. I think it's a very good sort of backbone for a game. But yeah, when you're making a game that is sort of difficult and there's a lot of kind of failure and retrying in, try and really juice the failure. It's very obvious to say, oh, when the player does the right thing and they finish a level and they get a star, or they, smash a thing and get some treasure out, make that feel really good, because that's what players come to games for. I think players that come to skill games also come to it for the, the pain. Like, what does the pain feel like? So it's worth juicing that early on as well. Okay, we're going to do a new game of Starlode. I haven't played this in a little while. And so this is a game that Snoodle has been working on for a few months. Snoodle is one of the people that's in our kind of mentoring tier. I have like 7 slots where people do one-to-one mentoring, and it's really just a call once a month where we go through a bunch of stuff. And this is a game where it's like, what Snoodle started off with is pretty much the same game, and it's sort of been working out the kind of creative direction and the fantasy and stuff. And the thing that I like about this game is you have this very light, it's a little bit like Deep Space Cache, or yeah, Deep Space Cache, where you're sort of flying around doing an incremental game with a vehicle collecting stuff. But you've got the fuel mechanic, and then you have this very, very light, drifty, slightly physicsy piloting. And I think that might be stressful for some people because you're sort of trying not to bump into things, but I actually find it very, very relaxing to do this kind of, you do a little bit of a push and then you leave it, and then you do a little bit of a push. I find that quite sort of chilled out and relaxing. Yeah, it feels pretty good. It's hard to get the balance with these kinds of games when you're like shooting things and blowing them up, of like making them feel sort of relaxing and cozy. I would maybe just tone down some of the pings and I think the pings are okay, but some of the gunshots and stuff, tone them down even more. The new art is looking nice. Dev just pivoted from it being pixel art to it being this sort of more hand-drawn style that looks a little bit... It's a little bit like sort of SteamWorld Heist, or a little bit RimWorldy. I do like the visual direction of this. And sort of all of the orange and everything is kind of playing into it being a sort of kind of Firefly western-y mining type thing, so it doesn't kind of create the expectation it's going to be a game about fighting enemies or something like that. I'm doing quite a lot for a single kind of run out though, so I do wonder if we want to sort of tighten that loop up. Yeah, I'm falling out of love with coin pings in my game currently. I have so many of them because there's quite a lot of coins that can appear on screen in my current game. I'm sort of trying to work out what to do with those. Because quite a sort of high frequency sound that's happening. I don't mean high frequency, I mean in terms of how often it happens. I do think it needs cowboy music though. It's like ambient western or something. ASMR cheek pops. Yeah, I think my game has one of those in still that I did myself. So I've said this before, but I think one of the things with sound design is just like, it's great to always just start off with a microphone and noises you can make into a microphone on Audacity, and like something like SFXer for just synthesizing very small sound effects. Because what you tend to find is when people want all of their sound effects to just be like really good, that leads you down a rabbit hole of spending a very long time going through libraries listening to sounds, which takes a long time and isn't as fun as just making them yourself. So people leave it too long to put sound in their game to give people feedback, when really you should just sort of sit at the computer and go into a microphone, because that way you get a sound for your game that is in your game and hasn't taken you half hour per finding each like WAV on a library on the internet or whatever your normal way of doing it would be. It's just the kind of request pickup. I didn't get back to the ship. I think because I'm in the starting ring that I don't because I'm in the starting ring, it doesn't cost me anything to get picked up, I think. Yeah, the mentoring is a tier on Patreon, but I only have like a set amount and they're all full up at the moment. And it's mainly just because I can only do so many. I can't remember that many people's projects. Map placeholder, okay. Here's where we can upgrade. We've got quite a lot of coins already on that first run. Yeah, I do think maybe the run feels very long at the start of this game. And I think maybe you want to tighten that up so that people go out and do it and come back more times and spend their money, because that gets you into the investment loop more quickly, right? If I've played the game for about 5 minutes now and we've only got to this screen once. If we got to this screen twice, we'd be a little bit more invested in the process of like getting the coins and spending them. And you want to do that to onboard people into the game and have them understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So let's put another double bolt there. We've got 2 guns now. Okay. But yeah, I don't do more slots than I can handle. And also I tend to vet people a little bit before they start, because I only want to do that stuff with people that are actually actively working on a game and not just like thinking about it. Because if you've got something, then I can look at it with you and go, okay, here's where you're at and stuff. Whereas like folks that are still very much at the start of learning to use a game engine don't really need design tutoring. They just need to learn the game engine, and then later on you can get that help with that kind of stuff, you know. But if you don't already have like a finished game or a few games you've worked on, it's very hard for any sort of mentor to look at what you're doing and then help you make decisions, because kind of like I was saying before, like a good choice is very contextual, and the things that decide whether a choice you make about your game development is good or bad are going to depend on like stuff like how long does it take you personally to do different sorts of things. I've just made a choice in the game I'm developing that is going to require me to draw dozens, maybe hundreds of characters with idle animations. But because of the role they play in the game, they only ever need to be idle animations. They don't need to run around or anything like that. And I enjoy doing it, which it means it's more kind of... it's a more sustainable thing to spec into the game for me. Because every time you sort of make a decision about sort of content or systems in your game, and if it's a solo project or a small team project where you're the engineer, you sort of have to think a little bit about, like, how much am I going to enjoy doing that? Because that's going to mediate how long it takes you. You know, if you make a game that where all of the components are things that you don't enjoy doing, there's always going to be something you don't enjoy doing, but ultimately you decide what you make. And if you've made a rod for your own back by making a game that you don't enjoy making, then that's a problem. And that's why I'm always very dubious of people who are still, you know, I don't think of myself as a professional indie developer. I think of myself as, I'm a professional game designer. I'm a professional game design educator. The games that I make in my spare time are hobby projects. I'm not running an indie studio. And I may feel differently about that in a year when the platform we're working on finally comes out. But I think people that think of it too much as a business and not as a hobby, often they're kind of you call it locus of control, right? It's in psychology, your locus of control is where are you putting your what are you basing your decisions on? Is it something inside yourself or is it something outside of yourself? And there are obviously reasons outside yourself for, like, what type of game you choose to make. Like, oh, I'll make this because that's popular and that's what people like. And that's sensible to a degree if you want to ever sell anything. But there's basically a market for every sort of game. And you're not going to sell any copies of your game if you make a bad one because you sort of, like, made something that you weren't personally enthusiastic about making. And I think people, like, underplay that bit. And when you're doing sort of a lot of sort of professional role play where you're actually a hobbyist but you're really kind of trying to treat yourself as a professional, you can fall into this hole of not prioritizing making stuff that you like or stuff that you enjoy making enough. And even in a very professional, like, big game studio, that's a bad call, right? We were talking about this on the podcast about the Tynan Sylvester book, where he's talking about, like, when you're managing a larger team and you're managing those people as resources, you do have to factor in stuff like, what type of things do people like doing or making? Like, what type of processes do people like doing or making? That's like the sign of a good producer, is they, you know, tweak the project a little bit to keep people's morale up by giving them, like, interesting challenges, or, you know, not just doing the same type of, like, grunt work every day and all of that kind of stuff. And I do think it's important to factor that into your projects. One of the things I like about the direction of this is it's starting to use this kind of more illustration-y style. And yeah, Snoodle is maybe getting a bit more comfortable with doing the art assets himself than he was at the start, which is cool. This is feeling great, though. And I mean, the fact that I can just waffle about another topic while playing it and sort of semi-zone out. That wouldn't be good if this was meant to be like a hardcore skill-based game, but it's actually one of the tests that we used to use for the first studio I worked at when we were making casual mobile games. One of the tests for it would be like, when you know how to play the game, can you hold a conversation about something unrelated while you play the game? And that's how you know that the game is, like, reasonably chill and casual, is it doesn't require all of your attention, unless you're just learning how to do it, you know? And the fact that I can kind of have a waffle about something else means that this is occupying that space quite nicely. We're gonna spend some coins. Yeah, I know sometimes it's like, oh, don't make too many art assets early on because you know. Oh, convert slag to fuel. Let's try that. You know, you don't want to lock too many assets in too early on so that you can't change them, but if you find them enjoyable to produce, then it's going to keep you working on the project. It also gives you stuff to post early on. You know, I go through phases of doing deep dives on my game's art and like over polishing it, or what other people would consider over polishing it. But at the same time, I'm not an artist, right? I'm a game designer. I can do a little bit of art and I can do a little bit of code. So sometimes I need to go too far on the art to learn new processes or learn new things about what works and what doesn't work in the art for that game. And I think I do that relatively at peace with myself over the fact that I'm going to throw a lot of it away. I think those are just the factors that go into making a good thing. It's like, how many times did you remake this? I've seen Tim Kaine talk about this on his channel. Like, when he's working on a big RPG with loads of systems, the quality of the different parts of the game tends to be a product of like how many times was that part reworked on. It makes total sense, right? Yeah, how many times have you remade the whole game or certain parts of the game? That tends to lead to more quality. And also, how much stuff did you discard? You know, you hear these classic stories about bands go in the studio, they produce an album of 10 songs, but they went and they recorded like 50 demos. And the process of making a good thing is actually just making lots of things. There's also that study with the two classes making the clay pots. I feel like Nate will understand this as well. If you're a 3D modeler, you'll understand this. There's a study with the clay pot study where like one class was directed to try and make 5 perfect clay pots, and the other class was directed to try and make 50 clay pots, and the group that made more ended up making things of higher quality just because they'd done it more times. That kind of thing. But if you enjoy the process of making the various parts of your game, you're not going to be that bummed out and sort of get sunk cost, you know, fallacy if you have to throw them away, because ideally you just think, well, that was a nice thing to do with my evening, you know. I've been sort of setting up and learning a lot of drawing tools on I had an iPad for a previous job that I sort of just kept after the job, and I said, can you just take the cost of the iPad out of my last paycheck, kind of thing, with an Apple Pencil. And I've got a couple of different drawing tools on there. I've got Procreate for drawing like painterly stuff, and I've got a pixel art program that I use. I don't use Sprite, I use Resprite, and that's partly because Resprite just has really nice dithering tools that I quite like. Loads of built-in cross-hatching and stuff. And the thing that's nice about having them on something that's not my work computer is that I can go and I can sit in bed, you know, I can go and like sit in the lounge when my kids are watching TV and sit with them, and I can do some art that may end up being a asset for the game, or maybe it's just a test. You know, I was sitting there drawing little crazy fantasy diners for a restaurant, a little beholder and a green lion and weird stuff, and I can just sit there and doodle. And some of the things might end up being game assets and some of them won't be, but I'm doing it as an activity that I would do away from the computer that's sort of semi-work, and that allows me to be more productive, but also go and spend time with people and not just all of my productivity having to be sitting at the computer in my work room, which I find very, very healthy for, you know, when you've got this kind of working from home lack of proper boundaries between your workspace and your home and everything that a lot of us have now. Yeah, it's just a nice thing to be able to do. Snoodle, I'm enjoying this. It's very, very chilled out. I think we should have a think about like what is there for players who are sort of more focused on it and get more in the zone. But a lot of that will come from just having a bigger palette of stuff that's out here drifting around, you know? Like, if you have these kind of basic rocks that are just fun to collect, maybe there's just occasionally something else that you bump into and pick up that's like a one-off thing that you collect. So you have like different tiers of things where it's like, here's a very common thing that's just like you blow it up to collect resources. And I guess the obvious one for me for this type of game would be like blueprints for the things you can buy in the shop. Like, you can't buy them until you've researched them, and you have to like blow up a certain thing and collect a blueprint. Or maybe there are like certain little pods floating in space with a little light on that have different types of stuff in. The music's getting spookier. Is it because we went to an outer ring? Running out of fuel. I have a directional pointer for the mothership, but I don't really know how far it is. Oh, we're not that far away. I'll just stay over here and get some more stuff. We can refuel using slag. That's cool. Okay. I mean, that introduces a nice little bit of decision making. Let's go right over here then. We're not going back yet. I do like the thing of having resources that sort of change their use or meaning over time. Someone mentioned Pacific Drive earlier when we were talking about games where you play as a vehicle. That has a similar thing. Has an economy where you use, there's like yellow, orange and red energy that you collect, and towards the end of the game the yellow energy starts to get redundant, so the game gives you a different sink for that energy. When we do kind of economy design in any games really, but I guess you wouldn't hear about it much outside of sort of big AAA or games as service games, you tend to talk about game economies as plumbing. So although we talk about game mechanics and we talk about games as like machines or engines, when we talk about game economies, the metaphors that are used for the theory around that are plumbing. So you have taps and sinks, or you have taps and faucets. You know, a tap is where a resource comes into the game, like pours into the game system, and a sink is like where it drains out. And game economies are just all about balancing that thing. And we've probably all experienced it where you get to a very high level in an MMO or something, and you just like money becomes meaningless because you've got so much of it. And that then it's like, okay, maybe we need to introduce a new tier of stuff that you can spend the money on, and you can just end up in this weird kind of crazy cycle of just introducing more stuff. You get it in D&D campaigns as well. It's like, oh, you've got 100,000 coins and there's nothing in the manual to spend 100,000 coins on, so you're like, do you want to buy a castle? I guess maybe but what you can do is you can just introduce different things to spend it on that are of like a totally different nature, you know. So in Pacific Drive later on, they take the energy that, this is a mild spoiler, they take the energy that you were using to upgrade from the start of the game that you no longer have a use for but are still occasionally collecting, and they use it to power a machine that lets you collect the rest of the cosmetics in the game that you might not have collected yet. Right, so the cosmetics are very sort of almost like a gacha machine that you don't get what you want. It's like you just have to collect a lot of them, and you're very subject to the RNG of which thing you get. And then at the end, they sort of solve that problem by funneling that resource into, you know, mitigating that RNG by giving you a lot more kind of pools on the gacha with it. So that's a really neat way of kind of switching what a resource does late into a game. And I think I've talked about this before, but when you're designing an economy, try and think of like a 3-act structure of what's the early game like, what's the mid game like, what's the late game like. And I think little features like this in what we can see in kind of Starlode here, having like a power up that lets you turn a resource that was previously for money into fuel, that's a good example of that, because we're kind of, it's not just another one of the same thing to spend money. You know, like when we're buying the weapons, it's just like you're buying things in the same category that get slightly more powerful. And that's great. That's kind of one of the things we expect to do with loot in a game. But if you can carry that on a little while and then have something to spend money on that just fundamentally changes how the resources work, it makes that stage of the game now feel different. And that kind of gives the player kind of more to get their teeth into. If you do it early on, like you've done here with the slag converter, then that's also promising to the player, because you're showing them that this isn't just an incremental game of grinding. There's also some like interesting decisions to make about which tools you put on the ship and what they end up doing. And again, I think Dredge is a really good reference for this, because in Dredge you have quite a limited amount of space for your loadout for your boat. I'm gonna Dredge ship game. What do I want? The menu. I want to see the actual menu of the interface. You have quite a limited amount of space on the ship, and actually the way it's built is that your all of your tools for fishing take up space that can also be occupied by your cargo. So the puzzle in Dredge, like what you're actually doing out here as you go around, is very simple. Like you learn to navigate this world, and you learn where all the islands are in relation to each other. But the movement you're doing in the game, in the world space of the game, is very simple. But what you're doing here is really where the source of this game is, because the items which allow you to fish for different things, all of the tools you use take up space that could be used for the things you fish. And then you've got nice stuff like using the L-shaped fish that you have to like fit into the puzzle. And I really like what this does. And I'm not necessarily saying that Starlode needs a grid inventory or something like that, but it does add this kind of puzzle of like, even just what you've already got in Starlode, where you've got like 4 or 5 slots on the ship. The fact that it's limited, and the slag converter that turns the slag into fuel, for example, is taking up a slot that could be used by something else. So that then creates like an interesting decision space of like, oh, I can have 2 of those, or 1 of those and 1 of those, but I can never have these 3 things together. So I always have to pick between my 3 favorites and work out which. That's kind of more interesting than just having like a perpetual series of upgrades that make something get incrementally more powerful. And there's a place for that, right? The kind of very just sort of zone out numbersy type incremental games are a bit like that. But I just like that there's like space there for messing around with kind of technologies that do different things, and that kind of ties into the spaceship fantasy quite well as well. So, add Iterum last. I'm just going to check back in the chat for some questions and stuff. Shane. Yeah, so you can submit games to the website on indiegameclinic.com. I do a stream every Thursday, which is just anyone's games. I schedule those about a month ahead. So if you've got a demo coming out in a month, there's a chance it might get on that stream. The thing about the Thursday streams is I don't play released games. They have to be works in progress. It just stops the game. It stops the channel getting like clogged up with loads of people trying to market their games that are out for sale. Because ultimately we're supposed to be sort of at least a little bit educational channel about how games are made and how to make them better. So we try and do a bit of a Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares with games. We're looking at them while they're being made, giving feedback and stuff like that. So if your game is at demo stage, if it's not out, if it doesn't have a price tag, there is a chance that I will include it on that if you submit it. There's just You just have to, where is it? Down here. Website down here, indiegameclinic.com, submit it on there. And then the stuff we do here on every other Wednesday is patron supporters. So they get a little bit longer. Sometimes I play the games more than once. So 3 out of the 4 games that we're looking at today are ones that I've seen before. And I've saved Iterum to last because we've played this twice already on the stream. And I really, really like this, but I also have some questions and queries about it. So the way that Iterum works is you sort of like, it's a traditional roguelike. You do a Diablo-style dungeon where you go down like 3 floors, and then you sort of finish the dungeon and teleport back up to the top. And there's lots of stuff that I like here. I like the art style. I like the set. I like the setting. What was the? I've said before, like the setting really reminds me of this 90s Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting, which is kind of like Conan meets Mad Max. It's sort of like, what if you had a fantasy setting and it was all in a big post-apocalyptic desert? It kind of gives me that vibe. And the thing that I like about the setting that Gabriel is making here is that I think it works very well with the pixel art. And this is kind of why Caves of Cud works as well. Is that if you're doing this kind of pixel art where everything's kind of very small and it leaves the benefit of this type of pixel art. I know it's very easy as a developer to look at this kind of stuff and go, oh, the reason that's good is because it's easy to make. But thinking of it as a player and a sort of art appreciator, the benefit of this kind of pixel art in Caves of Cud is that it leaves a lot of space for your imagination. So it's very, very evocative. So what we get with Caves of Cud is we get like a very strong sense of color, quite minimalist art, but the art that is there is kind of, it leaves a lot of space for your imagination. And I think that Iterum is doing a similar thing. And one of the things I like about Iterum, where it's this weird setting, they've called it a decaying, ever-shifting world. So it's kind of, it seems like it's going to be fantasy. There are some things in there once you get in there, and there's like guns, references to mutations, which starts to make it feel like a sort of Adventure Time situation where it looks fantasy and then it's not. And I really, really like that. And I think it's a very good use of the ambiguity of the pixel art as well, because if I see this type of game, if I see something like Iterum, and then I immediately see that everything is just stuff from Zelda or stuff from Tolkien, and it's all just like, you go into a cave, you kill a goblin, you kill a spider, that kind of puts me off a little bit, because it doesn't pull me into the world and make me want to explore it and understand its mystery. I think if you're making any game with a fantasy world, you can put a certain degree of like fantasy tropes into it, and you probably should, to make it recognizable. But I think it's that little, however big a slice it is of your world building, I think it's that strangeness or that difference that is what pulls people in. You know, like the thing that makes the Elder Scrolls compelling as a setting, or what makes Tamriel makes Tamriel compelling as a setting, is like, we recognize everything in the Elder Scrolls from fantasy, but the elves are slightly different, and the dwarves are extinct, and the way the orcs are sort of portrayed and depicted is a little bit different from how it might be in other fantasy. And I think having that, even if you're doing a very generic sci-fi or fantasy setting, having some part of it that's a little bit weird can be very, very helpful, because sort of learning the world and experiencing what's different about it from another fantasy world or another sci-fi world is the appeal of playing a game set in a fictional world. And I think there's a really nice overlap here between the art style that Gabriel is working in and this sort of slightly weird world where you don't know what anything is. And I've said this before about Slay the Spire as well. Like, when I first played Slay the Spire, I didn't like the art style and the characters and the world building. It just felt like sort of a little bit too weird for weird's sake. And then over time, I got used to it because I liked the game so much. And now looking back on it, what I realized about Slay the Spire is that as a sort of deck building roguelike, this is a game about learning systems. And it is, you know, you've got these 3 characters, you learn what they do, and then you use them over and over again to climb the spire and fight all the enemies. And all of the enemies do different things. The enemies in Slay the Spire aren't just like the same guy with more health over and over again, right? They're just fundamentally different in what they do and how you need to fight them and stuff like that. And the thing about Slay the Spire and the fit between the art and what you're doing in the game is that the art encourages you to see the world as alien and something that you need to deliberately try to understand, right? Whereas if you went to play a game like Slay the Spire and it was like you can be the paladin, the wizard, or the rogue, and they look like very generic Diablo characters, like very generic fantasy archetypes, and all of the enemies were just a slime, a rat, a skeleton, which some of them are variations on that. But sometimes making your world building and your creative direction a little bit weird can help to signpost something about the game and the process of learning the game. And I think that's particularly true in roguelikes. So although you might look at Slay the Spire and you might look at Caves of Qud and you think that's a totally different type of game, this is a traditional roguelike, this is a deck building card game. I think they have that same relationship between the way that you need to think about to play the game, which is to be inquiring and like seeing it as a puzzle of how all of these things fit together, rather than it being like a mindless clicking game, like a kind of top-down ARPG, like a Diablo or something, where it's more appropriate for it to just be like a standard, zombies and gremlins and a barbarian and a wizard and stuff like that, because that's, I don't want to say it's more casual, but playing a game like Diablo, it's much more what you see is what you get. And obviously it gets deeper and all of that kind of stuff. And you can get kind of really deep into how to strategize in those games. But the core experience for most people is very much what you see is what you get. Whereas with something like Caves of Qud or Slay the Spire, if you go into that thinking that it's a mindless game where you don't need to like pay attention and learn, you're going to have a bad time. So I think there's something about deliberately styling your world and your art in a way that's a little bit deliberately alienating and strange that kind of encourages players to engage with the game in the right way and the way that they need to in order to succeed in the game. And I find that all very, very interesting. Add Iterum. Pretty sure I downloaded this new version of the demo. I should have it on here already. Yeah, no, I haven't downloaded it. So the question that I really have about Ad Iterum, and it's not necessarily a make or break thing for the game at this stage, but it's definitely one of the things I felt last time I was playing it, and I'm going to be thinking about this time, is that for me, the make or break thing with one of these games is when I die and I start a new run, how quickly do I get to that point? I said this earlier. How quickly do I get to the point where my next run feels different from the previous one? And for me, that is much more to do with like which items does my character pick up, or if it's a game where you make your character, can I choose a different character, right? If I'm sitting there playing Slay the Spire and I lose one run, I won't play the same character again the next run. I'll pick a different character, and that's partly for variation and fun, but it's also like helps me clear my mind of what was previously in my deck. Because if I play as the same character 2 or 3 times in a row, or if I sit there for like 2 hours and play 2 runs of Slay the Spire and I play the same character, the second time I will keep forgetting what's in my deck and think I still have the deck from the first game, right? So there's like cognitive reasons, and there's also just the general variety of when I play run 2 after I die in run 1 and I play run 2, just how much variety is there in just like the options I get for what type of character I'm being. And in this game you don't build I can't remember if you build the character or not, but if in the first few minutes I can get some loot drops that just dramatically change how the game feels to play, because now I'm a tank or now I'm a ranger, that kind of stuff for me is where the sweet spot is for these games in terms of like making me want to play them over and over again. And like I said, that's not make or break for this game, because a lot of that comes down to just having a bigger library of content and making sure that there are opportunities to get at it early on, and you don't just always give the character the same thing at the start, that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily something that's like a problem that's baked into the game. It's one that, if there is that lack of variety, it's kind of easy to resolve because you just add more stuff. We've got daily run mode on this now. Okay, I'm going to be clicking around. I know that last time I had a much better time with this when I zoomed out. I still don't like this filter. So I said last time this was on stream that I found the game easier to play with the camera more zoomed out because I could see more of the dungeon. But when it's more zoomed out, the sort of CRT filter kind of ruins the way the game looks a little bit. We can't turn it off. Yeah, I would really think about that because it's okay. Let's get started. Thank you, Vagabond. Appreciate it. Thanks for the tip, Adri. Yeah, I'm liking trials. Hopefully the feedback was helpful. I think that's a neat game. All of the things that I mentioned are very easy things to sort of tweak and iterate on. Okay, so this trader is looking for some cartographer eyes and some chimera entrails. Okay. Who's this? Is there anyone else we can talk to? Escape to help. Who are these guys? Are they people or are they suits of armor? Put the music output on because the music on this is very nice. So we've got a sort of metagame structure where you've got different dungeons, and after you've beaten one, you can go and unlock the next. So this is almost like a kind of world map that you get in a Mario or a sort of one of those types of things. Leechborn Basin. Mutagens have drawbacks, and okay, didn't have enough time to read the loading screen tip. I think the way the combat system works is you have like you can always have a ranged and a melee weapons. This is getting kind of out of hand very quickly. I'm gonna die very quickly in this run. Yeah, I don't like the scanline effect. I think it's because it's not really mimicking a CRT because it doesn't have the glow. And we're also able to zoom in and the pixel art in and out. And that means that like the relationship between the pixel art and the scan lines changes. I know I talked about this last time it was on here, but I really do think it's a problem because for me, being able to zoom out further and see more of the map so that I can navigate better, this is like the ideal way of playing the game. But the pixel art looks better when the CRT lines aren't as pronounced. And I raised that last time, and like I said, it's not just an aesthetic thing. I didn't say this just because I think it looks bad. It's that it looks cool at this zoom level, the CRT effect, the scan lines. But you've given us the option to zoom out. I'm going to use the option to zoom out because the game is easier to navigate when I can see more of it. And now all of the pixel art is spoiled by the scan lines because they take up a considerably larger part of the sprite. I'm gonna eat that dung pie. Delicious. A bolt bundle. Collect that. Throwable rage mist. Grab that. Oh. Butcher that corpse. Can I eat that? I love eating ghoul meat. Let's use that mutagen. I've got toxic glands. Periodically releases toxic clouds. What's this guy? Stone bundle. Collect. Mutagen. Butcher. A lot of ghouls down here. I'm going to die very early in this run. Your form shifts unpredictably. I've got an unstable form. I don't have toxic glands anymore. I do like the way that the I'm a cheese! I've turned into a cheese! Got a club now. I got poisoned by... So that big eyeball-looking blob was poisonous and it killed me. I think some of this would benefit from a little bit more color differentiation as well. I was cheesing the game, yeah. Some of this, like... what I would do with the color here is make the value that the player... Make the player value white. And then make the name of the category like, I don't know, this turquoise or just some other color from the game. Because what will happen is over time, this second thing is the thing the player cares about. They sort of already know what the left-hand side says. So you can sort of differentiate those a little bit so it's just quicker to skim read it. I think when you make a game that's very text heavy like a roguelike, you need to use all of the tools at your disposal to make the information hierarchy clearer. So yeah, I'll put all the values on the right in white and put the values on the left, put the category headers in some other color, like pale grey or turquoise or something, or this gold or whatever. Parasite Forge. Control your hunger. I can never get enough time to read the tips. Now, what happens if I just run away from dudes until I find a weapon? Is that going to be better? Like, I just don't actually engage in combat unless I've got a weapon. Run away from them all. Flammable black oil grab. So I've never like played one of these so much that I got really into it. I've played a few of them, but they've always felt more like kind of curiosities than things I come back to over and over again. And my experience with Caves of Qud was very much that the problem I have with Caves of Qud is it asks you to invest too much in the character creation stage, and then you just die immediately. So I'll sit there for like 10 minutes making a character, play for 5 minutes and die. So I think my experience with Caves of Qud will probably be better if I go back to it and play it on the adventure mode at some point, where it's like an RPG where you don't have permadeath. And I will do that at some point, but I've getting sort of super into these to the point where I'm kind of coming back to one over and over again has just never really happened with me. Which is a shame, because I do like them. I think the emphasis on combat that's a lot of random rolls is a hard sell for me as well. I think, like, even in kind of real D&D, I don't... well, that was interesting. There's like a fire landmine type thing that goes off and has a countdown. I like the exploring. I like the learning the world. I feel like trad roguelike combat is something that people sort of suffer through because they like the rest of the game, you know. Unknown injector. I'll use that. Anti-venom injector. Okay. Not. Okay, oh, I can still use that though. I'm going to eat my odd vegetable. Look at this strange vegetable. I wonder what it is. Still haven't found a weapon this run. But I do like this one. I would like to check it out for a longer session at some point, but I'm not going to if the CRT effect doesn't get turned off or replaced with something a little bit lighter, because the legibility is absolutely ruined when you zoom out. I'm not going to keep going on about it, but I do think if this game gets submitted again and still has this CRT effect, I won't play it another time on stream, because, like I said, it's not just an aesthetic preference thing, it's like an accessibility thing. Can't see the game when I zoom out. Can we go over that way? Can I go through that mushroomy thing? Futile, can you not just have a very small piece of cheese? What's Kestros? What is it? It's a ranged weapon, a sling designed to throw heavy fletched darts with devastating force. Don't mind if I do. Okay, we've got a tactical vest, we've got a ranged weapon, we've got some spike knuckles, which I think is just the default melee thing. We seem to have cleared a lot of this stage. I'm not super... Hang on. Range mode tab. Okay. Skip. Oh yeah, these guys do need... Someone mentioned destroying the nest. I see. Okay. Took a bit of damage there, but cleared the nest. Let's take the mutagen. Enhance perception to see further. Okay, that's good. It's not too bad. Eat some meat. Kestros is ranged as has knockback, but Bolus has stun. So I'm gonna go for the weapon with the stun. Yeah, okay. Couldn't work out that UX before. Having for like using the ranged weapons. That rat. The rat went through the poison thing and it killed them for me. That seems to recharge as well, those poison blobs. Sacred pacifying herbs. I need to really start thinking about throwing some of these items as well. I can throw calming incense at people, like some kind of hippie. Looks like some stuff over here. Metabolic stabilizer. Unknown mutagen. Okay. I quite like the current mutagen is good. The current mutagen is just letting me see further with no bad stuff. None of these enemies are chasing us, so let's just go down into the next level now. Can you move around with number pad? No, apparently not. Nice big hammer now. Right. Now I need to start remembering what items I've got. I've got quite a lot of items. And some of them are for throwing. I'm going to equip the rusty hammer. Hang on. Attack 1, damage strike. Attack 2. Okay, I don't want the hammer then. I just assumed that would be better because it looked like it should be. Disassemble it. What am I dying from? Food poisoning. Oh, okay. Notched whip, range standard. Yeah, I find that the item and weapon names are just really, really evocative, and again, it just ties into that kind of the appeal of the kind of learning the strange world thing. I really like the kind of feel of the weaponry and stuff. Okay, we're running out of space in the inventory, so what we're going to do, we're going to eat the dung pie. We're going to inject the unknown injector. Oh, I'm berserk. We're going to use one of the hunger suppressants, which I don't really need, but don't want to be carrying it around. What's this? Ah! Rare ancient device may contain usable information if consumed. Chris, I'll be finishing this playtest in about 10 minutes, and then I will sort of do a last how to submit your game, but it is on the screen right now as well. I know it's very easy when you see sort of like text around a screen to sort of tune it out, but it's there to help answer your question, because it's a frequently asked question, so I put it on the overlay. I could have put an advert for something on the overlay. Is that going to be another mimic? No. Oh, it's traps. So, Gabriel, I don't know if you've been working on the actual level generator, but the dungeon feels a lot more purposefully designed than it did when I played it last time. I think my experience I don't know if it's like always a cave on the first level and then something underneath. I don't know, I haven't played it enough to see how it varies, but there's something about this dungeon that feels a lot more like a dungeon rather than some random stuff. I don't really know how to put it, and I think but that's part of making one of these games, right, isn't it? Is you're going to be iterating over the generator as well as you go through, not just sort of making it once and leaving it that. Right, I feel like if I eat stale meat, I'm going to get so much poison that I die. So, gonna get rid of some of these items. Let's equip the dart gun. Take a mutagen. I've got horns. Memory unit. Let's use the memory unit. Memory unlocked. Passage rights. I don't know what that means. Memories. Oh, here we go. To those who seek the deeper places, the seals respond to sacrifice, not strength. Those who bleed enough for blood keys to form may pass. The older engineers were precise in their cruelty. Oh yeah, I remember. So you get to the end of the dungeon and you need to have like... You need to have extra health left over to get a blood key to unlock the next dungeon. Is that how it works? It's a really cool game structure because it means you don't have to make loads and loads of game. So you have your like 3 dungeons that you need to complete on the main map in one run or whatever. And that's kind of equivalent to having your 3 sections of the tower in Slay the Spire, or your 4 different areas in Spelunky. It's a cool... I think the structure of this is good. It's also because it lets you know from the start how big the game is to a certain extent. It's kind of like when you say Act 1 in a game. It's like, well, I know that when something's described as acts rather than chapters, then it's probably 3 acts. And that starts to help you give the player like realistic expectation of how big the thing is and what's in it. Explosive clay pot. I've got a nice Sauron hat on now. Oh, that's my horns. I've evolved into Sauron. Unstable horns 1. Spiky bones erupt from your skin, weakening your guard. Oh, is that like... So that's like an evolution of my mutation. So I had a mutation and then it's like over time it's turned into another version. But it's a bad version. I guess it could have gone either way. It's like just a gamble. It's what happens when you go around sticking mutations in yourself. It's like Grandma always used to say, like, be careful. Be careful what mutagens you pick up. Never take a mutagen if you don't know what it is. My grandma used to say that all the time. Get rid of some of these spare weapons that we don't need. I've only got 2 health. I'm not going to make it through the dungeon, but... I made it through the dungeon on an earlier build, but I also suspect it was easier then. Marcin, are you like a sort of roguelike, a trad roguelike expert type person? So I imagine that they tend to be these dungeon crawlers because there's not a lot of like talking to characters, right? So it means that you can just focus on kind of looting and killing stuff and then having some fun emergent interactions like that rat getting killed by that poison trap and stuff like that. The reason I'm asking is like I think this would be a very cool format to make like a cyberpunk game in as well, like a city with a lot of kind of little characters moving around. But I can also understand why people don't go for settings where you would expect to be able to talk to the characters, because most of the character interactions are just things like chasing after you and killing you kind of things. Yeah, it's not a genre I've ever gone super deep on. I've played a few of them, but never got into one to the point where I've like really wanted to complete it kind of thing. I think it's interesting to think through what sort of qualities one of these games would need to hook me. I think the thing I really like about the structure of this is that kind of thing of it's just telling you from the get-go how long it is. You know, I need to do that dungeon and that's got 3 floors, and then I need to do this dungeon and this dungeon, and if I do all of those 9 floors, I think that's what it is, then I've basically completed the game. And to be fair, the way I just described the game may be wrong, so don't take my word for it, but that's the impression that the game gives me at the start. And I kind of like that because it's just sort of showing me the game laid out in front of me and going like, this is what you're going to experience. And I think that is part of the appeal of like modern run-based games. I think one of the things that's made me historically bounce off of these type of traditional roguelikes is just that I don't know how big it is when I start. Like I never completed original Diablo for that reason. I was just like, Yeah, there's a bunch of levels. How many? I don't know. How do they do it in the FTL map? Yeah, so like in FTL, if you've played it, it's like it's still in the kind of, it's not in the traditional roguelike mode of being a grid-based crawler, but it is kind of in the traditional roguelike mode of you're not like getting rewarded for failure. You fail, you die, you learn stuff, and then you play it again. And this has that similar quality of like when you start the game, it's like, okay, I'm going to play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sectors. And then I finish my run if I win. And because it's this type of grid, there's no way to pick to do more. You're always going to be doing the same amount. And then the direction you go in is going to determine what type of sector you get. And when you're inside a sector, you can choose to go a long route and spend a little bit more time there, or you can rush through it. But there's something about like the knowledge, having the knowledge as a player, that the game is almost presenting itself as a percentage complete bar and showing you like the notches of like how long you're going to be playing it and what's required to play it. And the thing that I like about Iterum is that it has this structure where, you know, you play through the first dungeon and you see how many floors it is and you see how long that takes you. And then once you get out here, you're kind of like, okay, I can see how big the game is and how long it's going to take me. And to me, there's actually something very appealing about knowing that, okay, this is a game that once I've learned how to play it, maybe I could complete the game in an hour. And I think that's when run-based games work for me the best, and that's part of, I think that's also part of the reason why I've been bouncing off of Caves of Qud every time I go to play it, because I love the world building. I want to hang out in Caves of Qud. It's very cool. I like setting up my little character, but it requires me to invest so much thought into setting up my character and learning what they can do, and then you die very quickly and you're back to retrying, and there's nothing laid out in front of you to say like, and I understand that part of the appeal is meant to be just go out and exist in the world, right? Which is kind of what you get in a Skyrim or a Fallout game. It's that sort of sense of, you know, it's almost less like an RPG where you're on a quest to do a specific thing, and it's more like an ImSim that just happens to have some of the trappings of an RPG, where it's like you're going to inhabit this world and you're going to be immersed in it. And I understand that with a game like Caves of Qud, or maybe certain traditional roguelikes like, is it Ultima Regio Ratium? I'm saying it wrong. Those ones that generate a whole world, there is that kind of endlessness that is really appealing to people. But I think one of the reasons why the kind of modern run-based game is, you know, I think it would be easy to take these trad roguelikes and modern roguelikes and say the reason that the modern ones are popular is because they look better or something like that, or they have less clunky interface. But I think you can update these more trad roguelikes by just more clearly signposting how long the game is going to be and the things that the player needs to do to beat the game. And I understand it's a different sort of game, but thinking back on why I've bounced off of certain games in the past, it's like, I think this isn't me like being critical of something or saying it's bad design or anything like that. I'm just, when I talk about this kind of stuff, what I'm trying to do is work out why I like and dislike certain things, work out why other people like and dislike certain things, and that's just something you need to do as a thought process as a designer. And it's not necessarily me saying that something is bad, it's just trying to work out and articulate why I seem to prefer one thing over another. Because, and the reason I do that on streams is not to say, I think you should like this and I think you shouldn't like this. It's so that you get that modeled for you, right? You see what it looks like when someone else does this thought process of like doing the design thinking of like, why do people like this and not like this? And why do I like this and not like this? And I think the appeal of like a big endless open procedural world where you can go and do anything and like live in it, I understand the appeal of that, but for me that is much stronger in a game where I'm like building a life, if that makes sense. So having a big, endless, procedurally generated world is very appealing to me in Minecraft, where I'm there to like survive and hang out and build a little house. And having like a really big world where I don't really know what I'm supposed to do to complete the game, right? Like a survival crafting game like The Forest, or in like a, you know, any game where I'm like building a little base or something. That's appealing to me because the goal of the game for me is to live in that place and survive in that place. Whereas I think in like a game that seems to be like a quest game about dungeon crawling and like fighting loads of enemies and becoming more powerful, I feel like I want... It's almost like Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings, right? If you were to sit down and watch all of the Lord of the Rings films or read the books, you know it's going to be cut into 3 episodes, and you know from the first half hour of reading the first book or watching the first film that the goal is to get to Mount Doom and throw the ring into Mount Doom. Spoiler alert for the first 5% of Lord of the Rings. And for me, I think when a game is kind of about challenge and strategy and being a hero who is overcoming obstacles and stuff, I think having that all laid out for me and knowing that that's what I'm trying to do, and having that kind of sector map in FTL, or you know, having Slay the Spire tell me you're in Act 1. Roguebook does the same thing. Roguebook just has 3 areas that you work through with the different set things in and stuff like that. And it just kind of gives you a good sense of how long it's going to take to play a session of that game. And that makes me more likely to come back after I fail as well. Because when I fail, there's like, how much is the game pulling me back in to have another go? And I feel like if I understand how far I got, then I'm more likely to play again. And I think one of the things that that's quite good about the structure of Ad Iterum, I can't remember if the dungeons are like 3 levels deep or 5 levels deep, but like once you've played a dungeon, you have a good sense of how long it is. And even if you die right at the end of that dungeon, you still think, oh, I'm a third of the way through the game. That means I actually did quite well. I can maybe get 2/3 next time, right? You have this way of like being able to judge yourself that makes you feel good even though you failed, because you're able to fail and go, and you have like, I mean, even an action roguelike like Hades, right? Or Binding of Isaac or something like that. When you fail, you have a good sense of how far you get, of how far you got. And that makes you go, oh, I did better than last time. I'm getting better. I want to play it again, right? I'm starting to master this game. Whereas I think a game that puts you into a big open world, or like just generates in a way that is less structured and more structured around being a simulation of like a cool place to explore and learn about, which is what we get in Ultima Regioration. It's what we get in Caves of Khurd. It's what we get in Dwarf Fortress. That's very, very cool. And I like it and I understand the appeal. But I think there's something a lot more accessible about saying this game is 3 levels in this area, 3 levels in this area, 3 levels in this area, and you have a very clear, almost like a progress bar as you work through that game. And that's maybe just why, one of the reasons why the kind of more traditional simulate a whole world type of roguelike is much more of a niche than the modern one. And it's not just the fact that it's pixel art and it's on a grid and it's turn-based and all of those things. So anyway, there's some thoughts. I really like this game, but I do want to wait to turn the scan lines off, because it's not just a cosmetic thing. It really does become a accessibility thing of not being able to use the zoom function, because once you're zoomed out, you can't see what the different things are anymore, and that kind of ruins it a little bit. Yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. As I said throughout the video, this is the fortnightly one that is to say thanks to people that support the channel, that everyone that pays into the Patreon, gets access to the Discord, is able to submit their games to this particular stream. And that is like a bonus for people that support the channel. I do streams every week for basically anyone's games. You submit a game via the form on indiegameclinic.com. If as long as it's a game that's not released yet and it's a game that you genuinely want feedback on because you're still working on it and you might make some changes based on that feedback, send it in. I will try and get round to it. I tend to sit down at the start of the month and schedule my 4 Thursdays for that month of which games I'm going to play using a theme. I try and alternate between certain things so that I don't get too biased towards just playing the stuff I like. So one of the things I'm doing at the moment is on every other week I play real-time games, and then every other week I play kind of more turn-based thinky games, right? So sort of alternating between action games and thinky games. Tomorrow we're doing like deck builders, I think, sort of more turn-based thinky games, which is probably where a little bit of my bias lives. It's not that I don't like action games. Some of you would have seen a few weeks ago I was playing something called Rewinded, which was a amazing assassination game where you had to assassinate a target, and then a different version of you from another timeline came and had to assassinate the previous version of you. So it was like the most wild use of like ghost, player ghost technology I've ever seen in a game. This is an example of an action game that just very kind of tight scope, very polished in the right places, nothing in the game that didn't need to be there. But I do tend to find that it's not that I don't like action games. I think they're harder to execute well. So I tend to end up being more picky about which action games I stream. Just because I don't want to be I don't want to have streams where I know that the 3 things or the 4 things I've picked to play that day are all going to be something that I have to be really negative about. Because it's not fun, And no one aspires to be a YouTuber or like a games content creator or like a games critic and then exclusively only play things that they think they're not going to like. That's no good. That's not why anyone gets into this. But yeah, this is so good. It's such a good example of like the type of action game that I think is just superb, which is just like a tight, focused one that has an interesting concept and is kind of stylish, which does matter, right? Like you think of like the fantasy of when you give people a game where they're running around beating stuff up. What are they supposed to emotionally feel about that? They're supposed to feel cool. If your game doesn't look cool in some way, then maybe you've got a problem there. But yeah, every Thursday it's games sent in by whoever. I would say all the games on the list, sometimes I don't get round to them in time before they're released, so they go off the list, they get deleted. Sometimes they'll get deleted if they're really objectionable. Like I've had games before where it was like, I don't know, there was something a little bit hateful in the game and I didn't play it for that reason. And yeah, but mostly I get round to them all eventually. It's just sometimes, things take... I think I played a game last week that had been in the queue for a year. There's like 200 games in that queue. But that's the core of the channel. That's why I set the channel up. I wanted to get... I think the story that you will hear from a lot of game dev YouTubers that were previously working in the games industry, because there's kind of 2 types, right? There's folks who perhaps have never done industry jobs, who have decided to become game developers in their spare time, and then they make YouTube content about it. And then there's folks like me where we, maybe we learned game dev as a hobbyist, and then we got a job in a studio, and then we've been doing that for a while, and then we come here eventually, and we've got this experience. I'm kind of more from that background. And part of the reason I set this channel up was I'd done 2 different game design jobs in 2 years. After I was working in academia for a while teaching. I had my first game design job, then I moved to academia and was teaching game design for 4 or 5 years. And then I did 2 jobs after that were like both in games as service. So one was doing metaverse stuff like Roblox and Fortnite, and then a year after that it was doing casual mobile games. It was a very well paid job, but it was like after that I was like I want to have some time just working with or on the types of games I actually care about. So instead of just like I'm going full-time indie and like setting up a YouTube channel and being like, I'm going to make my own game and do a YouTube channel about it, which to me isn't that interesting, because it's like, okay, I'm a professional game designer and I'm a game development educator, right? Those are the things that I have done in the last like 10 years of my life. But I don't really consider myself an indie game developer, in the sense that I think that's like a professional title for someone that has actually released games, rather than like just a hobbyist, right? Which when I make my own games, I kind of think of myself as just a hobbyist who is tinkering around. So I set this channel up to be like, okay, I would like to get consulting work. I would like to help indie developers with the design of their games. And initially I was just thinking, oh, maybe I'll get like 1 or 2 clients and that will become a full-time job. And then eventually we got a big enough community around the channel and like people supporting it via Patreon and stuff, that actually just hanging out and dipping into people's games on the stream and talking about it and stuff became, that's like kind of 60% of my day job now, which is really cool that I get to do that. And it also means that the channel has a slightly different vibe, because I know that most of the other game dev YouTubers play people's games on stream, but it's almost like that's not really the main function of their channel, right? It's like a bonus that they do to say thank you to their community and all of that kind of stuff. So, when you see another channel and someone's playing people's games, that's great. And I'm glad that they do that, but it's not like they're there as a design consultant and that's like the main thing that they're doing on their channel. Whereas what I'm doing here is kind of like, okay, I'm trying to, first of all, it's like I'm trying to give people like a free bit of consulting, right? This is kind of like there's this form of marketing that you will have noticed where people give out free samples of something that they want to sell to you, like a piece of cheese at the grocery store, or someone selling narcotics at a party might do this occasionally. And so that was kind of part of the thinking. It's, I'll do the thing for free in public, and then people can be like, hey, I like that thing you do for free in public. If I pay you, will you do that for me? But instead of for 20 minutes, do it for 20 hours, that kind of thing. And that was like the initial thing behind it. But also it's kind of like this is what we do in workshops in a class. If you've not had the opportunity to go to university and do game dev in a university, right? Like if you do an arts-based subject in a university, once you get to like the 2nd or 3rd year, a lot of the emphasis moves from just like learning the skills to iteratively like practicing and sitting around. Like even in a poetry class, you do this. There's a thing you do in a poetry class where you just sort of sit around and listen to each other, read the poems, and then you talk about them. And making sure there's a space on here for that kind of thing is really important to me, because I think people think that you learn game design from like learning a set of rules or like theory from a textbook and stuff. And that can be very helpful. And that's why we started a whole podcast about that. But really, like, game design is like a 2nd or 3rd order problem, which by that I mean that you don't understand what's good or bad about your design until you've started making it. And then you can only tell for yourself a certain amount. It's like we were talking about in the playtesting video that I put up a couple of weeks ago. You can only really understand your own game from a certain perspective, and you need other people to kind of look at it and stuff like that. And then the last one is like, obviously when people submit their games to this sort of thing, they do to some extent want exposure. They want people to see the game early into development and go, oh, this is cool, I'll follow the development of that. And like, I understand that. But also it's kind of like the exposure part is the least important thing from my perspective, because, we're here to kind of like take things apart and get people interested in analyzing games and understanding how they work and all of that kind of stuff. But I like the fact that, someone having their game on a stream, even if I'm not like glowingly positive about it, people want the exposure, right? So that's part of the reason why they submit their games. And then that's kind of rewarding people for being brave about wanting to get feedback. Because like one of the offshoots I'd like this, or one of the effects I'd like this channel to have, is not just necessarily people thinking that it's important to get feedback from me, but for people to see the value of just having anyone play your game, right? Because so many people are just like making a game, spending a big chunk of their life on it, releasing it, and never really testing it with anyone, and all of that kind of stuff. And hopefully there'll be some people that like watch these streams and they never submit a game, but even just seeing the value of playtesting and like will help them to sort of feel encouraged to sort of show their game to their flatmate, or organize a playtesting party where they get some buddies round and they go look, I'm launching my game next week, I need some QA help. If I buy you pizza, will you play the game for 2 hours and write down all the bugs you find? Whatever it is, just anything that helps people to understand that the craft of game dev isn't just coding an art and then ship it, that's kind of what we're here to do. And yeah, thank you to everyone that supports the channel, and thank you for tuning in today. I'm gonna go and get some food. I'm gonna lay down in a dark room and scream. No, it's been a good stream. I will go and put the timestamps on the VOD. Thank you for joining in. Bye bye.